helping to look after us. We had a governess as well.
Yeah. And what did the family do? What sort of holidays did you take, or what did you do together?
Most holidays yearly were to Italy, to Abbazia and Fiume, and
was that
very little when I was very little, when the parents were still together.
Yeah. And you have a brother and a sister. Could you give us their names?
Yes, I've got a sister. Her name is Gretel, and I've got a twin brother whose name is Walter.
And with your parents, you said your parents were together at that stage. Would you like to tell us about that?
Well, I remember only the first 4 years of my life when they were together, and I was living with them in the first district, which was a city of Vienna.
Mm-hmm. Where did you live in the first district?
It was called Museumstraße.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember anything about your home, your apartment?
It was a very big, I think 6 or 8 room apartment, a whole floor, and was very elaborate in those days. We were quite well off.
Mm-hmm.
And then my father divorced, I think in 25 or 23.
Prior to that divorce, do you remember, were the majority of your parents' friends, were they in the Jewish community, or were they mixed, or?
They were mostly Jewish. Not all of them Jewish, mostly Jewish. After Hitler had come. So we left. I said we had to go to Brünn, and I went to the English.
What happened when you were called to register to wear the yellow star? What did you?
Well, when we were called to register,
this is in 1939.
Mm-hmm. We didn't want to have the J put into our personal. Wasn't a passport, was a identification. Yeah. And they didn't agree not to register us, so my father said, you better leave for Brno, and my wife and I will go to Prostějov, and we register you for a transport to Palestine, which was a flesh transport. It was a private transport when we registered.
And your sister?
My brother, myself, and my sister moved with my mother into a flat in the 6th district, which was called Maria Hilf and Hirschengasse. And my father lived on his own. Yeah.
And did you go to school in that area?
I went to school in that area.
Yeah. And up until what time did you live with your mother, Ernst?
I lived with my mother until about 13 years, 13 and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And then my father went to Czechoslovakia and took us with him, and left my sister with my mother in Vienna.
And during the period that you lived with your mother, up until you 13 years, you attended state schools?
State schools.
And did you have any sort of Jewish life at home? Did you celebrate Shabbat or high holidays?
No.
Did you go with your father to synagogue at all?
No.
So you were fairly assimilated?
Very assimilated, very.
And did you do your bar mitzvah?
No bar mitzvah.
No bar mitzvah. And so when you were 13 and your father had moved to Czechoslovakia?
Yes.
And what happened then?
Well, then we came to Czechoslovakia. I couldn't speak any Czech at all, so I went for 1 year to school in Czechoslovakia to learn the language. And then I went to work into the factory where my father was a director.
And what was that factory?
That was a clothing manufacturing business which existed in Brünn and in Boskowitz.
And your father was in Boskowitz?
He was in Boskowitz and commuted between Brünn and Boskowitz weekly, actually twice, 3 times weekly.
And how big was this enterprise?
That was very big. That had about 300-400 employees, outdoor and indoor.
And what was your brother doing?
My brother was learning to become a tailor. He was apprenticed and then worked as an apprentice and then became a fully fledged licensed tailor.
And your training led you to what?
My training was the business side of manufacturing. I was what they called manipulant and also traveling when I became more versed. My father took me along on his travels. He was in charge of making the collection and in charge of picking the fabrics and in charge of selling.
And these are the years sort of 34 through to 39 we're talking about, aren't they?
Yes.
Do you remember being aware through your father's business associates or things that he said to you about the rise of Hitler in Germany and any foreboding about
yes,
that?
in Boskowitz was a very big Jewish community, and we were mostly moving in that. We were only practically, except for sports, we were in Jewish company most of the time. And so was he. He was only moving in Jewish company.
And what sort of things were being said? Do you remember?
Well, they said that Nazism is coming from Germany and that dictatorship, and there were already upheavals in Austria before with Schuschnigg and with a lot of political. And we were social democrats, like most Jewish people in those days in Europe were social democrats. And so we became members of Maccabi and members of table tennis clubs and members of tennis clubs.
And was there any talk about possible immigration or leaving Czechoslovakia?
None whatsoever. None whatsoever until actually the Sudeten part was occupied. Then we started talking that eventually Hitler will occupy Czechoslovakia, he will gobble up all of Czechoslovakia, and once he gobbles it up, we will have to leave.
And so there was really no thoughts of moving before when the rise.
And that was only for the boys to leave. My father didn't intend to leave. He was in a mixed marriage and he thought he'll be
This is his second marriage now, I
protected.
guess.
Yes, which was.
And was there any incidents that you can remember, either at school when you were in Vienna or in Boskovice, that was anti-Semitic in character that you can remember?
No, it was there was no anti-Semitic personally in Vienna to me. In Czechoslovakia it became very anti-Semitic after Hitler came,
But to
mainly
you,
from the German-speaking.
but for you personally, you don't remember?
Well, I remember that we were immediately, all Jews were persecuted. We had to hand in all radios, we had to hand in all
When was
jewelry.
this?
That was in Boskowitz.
Yeah, but what time, what year?
That was 1939.
But up until then?
Up until then, well, we knew from the German-speaking part, it was occupied in 1938, that it's going to move that way. But once they occupied, we got immediately the sack. My father and myself got the sack from the firm.
Yes.
And the employees became immediately anti-Jewish. And the bosses had to go everywhere. It was taken over.
Your father's business was requisitioned. It was taken away.
It was requisitioned.
Yeah. Just going back a little bit, you had mentioned about sports. What type were you involved with, Maccabi or Hillel Lavan?
Tennis. We were in the junior tennis championship and became very good at it.
Yeah.
And
Was that a
we
particular
played
group?
with Drobny and with, you know, in part we traveled.
Yeah. What was the name of the group that you belonged to?
That was just a Boskowitz tennis club.
Yeah.
But table tennis, I belonged to Maccabi, and that was a Jewish club. So I played table tennis for Maccabi, and I played soccer just for the town, because I played soccer in Vienna already. And there they broke my leg, and my father said they haven't got the skill, so they substituted with force, so you better leave it and start playing tennis, because they're too rough on me. So I gave up soccer and started playing tennis. I was only 15.
And were you a member of any Zionist youth movements, organizations? Or?
Yes, we became moved in that group, and it was called Maccabi Hatzair and Chelet Lavan.
Can you tell us
Blue
what
and white or
Chelet,
whatever it is.
Chelet Lavan, what was that exactly? Can you tell us what Chelet Lavan was?
It was actually a Jewish social group, and you had meetings and you discussed world affairs and all what's happening, and if going on Hachshara and going on to Palestine and emigrating and all that.
Was there a keenness to go to Palestine from Czechoslovakia as a youth? Or?
Well, there was nobody ever wanted to go until the threat of Hitler came, and then there were a lot of them were making Aliyah, and Aliyah was youth Aliyah was there, and some people managed to go. Others had relation from Germany and went to America or went to Canada or went to Australia.
This was in the
See,
late.
we knew all this because in 1938 Austria was already taken over, so we knew of the Kristallnacht, and my sister and mother went through the Kristallnacht in Austria. So.
Yeah. And what was happening to your mother and your sister?
My sister was lucky enough to receive a permit to come to Australia because her boyfriend got the permit and the people that sent it thought that they were married. And my mother remained in Vienna, and we didn't know she was alright when we left, but later on she was taken to, as a foreigner, as a Czechoslovakian citizen, she had to do road work. And these 700 people got on a 300-ton boat. And what I remember is that the same night that boat sank, and we had to evacuate fast of it.
In the
house, and my sister. We had to get out. My father thought that he would have protection.
And why did he think he'd have protection?
Because he was married to a non-Jewish wife. He thought he'll get somehow protected by her. But she would not be able, because we were Jewish registered, there was no way we could be protected.
And your father would have been registered Jewish as well?
Yeah.
And what happened to your father?
My father stayed until 1994 at home. He could stay almost to the second last year. Then they were arresting mixed marriage.
Was he in hiding?
Jews as well. He wasn't in hiding. He was home.
So this is 1944.
1944. Then he was sent first to a prison in Prague, and from the prison in Prague he was sent to Theresienstadt, and there he lived until liberation and returned, but of course we didn't know all that.
No. And his wife?
His wife stayed all the time in Prostějov, and after the liberation she was declared a German by the Czechs and was told to get out of the country because she was German.
But she was married to a Czech?
She was married, well, it was German. I mean, my father's mother language was German. His Czech was worse than mine, actually.
And they were not forced to divorce because they were.
They weren't forced to divorce. No.
So to go back to you, you said that you, with the not wanting to have the J on your identification, you and your
Yeah.
brother went to Brunn.
In Brünn.
Yeah.
Where
What
we
did you
didn't
do there?
declare that we were Jewish. We
Yeah.
registered for an illegal transport to Palestine.
Yeah. So you didn't register at all with the state.
We
No.
didn't register with a Jewish. Well, we were registered with a Jewish agency
Yeah.
because the transport was.
So the transports were private, or they were through the Jewish agency?
Well, it was a private. The previous ones were private, but it took so long. It took until 1940 to leave. That the fellow that was running it in the meantime was arrested, and the Jewish agency had to take over. And that was the last transport that left, the very, very last transport that was allowed to leave.
So what did you do in Brunn between the time you arrived and getting on a transport?
Well, that time, whilst we were waiting, my brother worked as a tailor, and I went to the English Institute. in
And were you
Brünn.
passing as Aryans?
We were passing as Aryans, yes. There were
And which were you using your family name, Hoenig?
Hoenig, and spoke German a lot, mostly. Spoke German and maintained that we were one of the German occupiers. So didn't get out.
Can I ask, at the English Institute at this stage, they would have a ban on admitting Jews. Is that right?
I wouldn't know. I never
So
never told them.
I know. I realise you didn't.
Yeah.
So you were there illegally, probably as well. maybe.
Well, I don't know whether it was more or less. I don't know if we had to pay for it or not. Whether it was a private college or whether it was, it wasn't a state-sponsored thing.
And what prompted you to go and learn English?
Well, we knew we wanted to emigrate, and I wanted to speak English. I wanted to know English.
So can you give us details of how you actually approached this transport? How did you get in touch with the Jewish agency? How did you know about it?
Well, we knew that there were transport going since 1938, 39, were transport going to Palestine, illegal transport. And we knew who went and who was going and who was registering, and we registered as well. And it was postponed, and the Nazis didn't let it go, and the Nazis didn't let it go. And in September 1940, they suddenly said those few hundred people can go. So we left.
Yeah. Do you remember the name of anybody in the Jewish agency that you dealt with?
No, I only knew the leader of the transport,
And
the name of the leader of the transport.
Do you remember his name?
Yeah, Brown was his
Yeah.
name. Brown.
Mr. Brown.
Yeah.
And was he a Czech?
He
Or was
was
he?
a
Or is it Israeli
All
or-
Czechs spoke
Yeah.
German in those
Yeah.
days. And there were quite a few on the transport that were here in Sydney, that were on the same transport. We were a group that were sort of young and running the transport. We were carrying the luggage for the old people, and
So this wasn't just a youth transport. This was a
it was a mixture completely between young and old,
and children.
and children, and everybody who could get on, and paid I don't know how many thousands of crowns it costs to you weren't just taking it.
No.
Cost a lot of money.
Was it very expensive?
Very expensive.
So is it fair to say that most of the people were middle class people who were on this transport?
Or had to borrow,
Money,
steal,
yeah.
or whatever to be able to afford it.
And roughly how many people would have been on this
So
boat?
it left from Brno or from Brünn was about 300.
On this ship?
Yes.
Do you remember any sort of Jewish on the ship? Were there people of different Orthodox ship, or was everybody just very keen? What was the sort of talk on the ship? What was the...
Well, mostly survival.
Mm.
When are we going to sink, and when are we going to drown, and how am I going to live through it? And I'm so sick, and we hadn't sold. Tell them sit here, and be quiet and worry we will get there, and once we get to Palestine everything will be alright, although we weren't that sure that we'll ever get there. It took 2 months before the British boarded the ship and towed us to Haifa.
And were there a whole group of languages being spoken on this ship?
Yes, there were a group Czech, and the group was Austrian German, and some Romanian were there too.
And how did you interact with the crew of the ship? Were the crew of the ship sympathetic?
The crew of the ship was Greek, and the crew of the ship, all I remember that they were shouting "Apati andere Seite," "Apati," that means go to the other side. Otherwise I don't remember anything. Yeah. And every port we came to, Crete or whatever, the leaders of the transport tried to organize food and supplies, and
And were you allowed to disembark anywhere?
No.
So you were literally on the ship for 2 months?
Literally on the ship. Right.
And then when you actually left Greece, what happened?
Well, we went through the Aegean to the Mediterranean, and when the Mediterranean closer to Palestine, the British saw us and boarded us, and actually told us to hide illegal immigrants. And there we were in Haifa by that time, 3 ships, our ship and 2 other ships.
Do you remember the name of the other 2?
I have had the names written on. I think Atlantic was one, and the third one I can't at the moment remember. And these people from the 3 ships, which was about 2,500 or whatever, they were supposed to be put onto the Patria. That was a ship of 20,000 tons, a very big ship, 8-story high. And the story was that we cannot stay in Palestine. It's an illegal immigration, and they have decided to deport us to Mauritius, and where we have to stay until the end of the war, because this is 5th column. These are spies that are on these ships, not because they are Jewish, but the spies, German spies, and we are to be deported.
What was the reaction when that news reached the ship?
Well, we were not very happy about it, but we didn't know what we could do. But we were told by the Jewish organizations in Palestine that they are doing their utmost to keep us there. See, they were loading up coal, and they were bringing food, and they were telling us that they are negotiating to get the ship to stay. But what happened was that with one lot of coal, the Irgun, or the extremists, sent in a bomb, and the ship was under full steam already, and 2 of the 3 ships were...
It had left the harbour?
No, it was still in the harbour. But 2 of the ships were already on the Patria, and the 3rd ship hasn't started yet to be transferred to the Patria. As it turned out, the 3rd ship that wasn't on the Patria yet was deported to Mauritius. And the people that were on the Patria were staying whilst the ship, they intended to damage the ship so that they can keep on negotiating. But they misjudged the size of the bomb, and the bomb made a hole like the door, and the ship sank in 12 minutes. A 20,000 ship sank in the harbor within 12 minutes, just keeled over. And of course it was a huge explosion, and the British police that were on the boat didn't know what happened. They thought there was some sort of a rebellion. But they were chasing people with the guns down into the bunkers to get order. And I was lucky enough to be with a broken arm in hospital. Washing the deck, I fell and broke my elbow. And there was a big panic and people were screaming, I can't swim and I've got baby and the ship will sink. And I was on the bed and I said, look, a ship like this takes hours before it sinks. I couldn't get the people to believe me, so I turned to the wall and I haven't got a life jacket, here's my life jacket. I wasn't worried. But the ship sank so quickly that as it tilted, the bunks from the top started to unhook and fall down. So I thought to myself, it is time now to try and get out. It's sinking quicker than I thought. And by the time I got out, I slid down, that was on the top deck, and I could see the benches on top already swimming in the water. So luckily, I was as high as this. I just dived under and out, and I was in the water. And I swam to the middle where the ship was anchored to. And on the way, somebody said, I've got a baby, I can't swim, can you take my baby? So I took the baby, and this one was in plaster, so I took the baby and swam the mole and handed it over. And I wanted to go back, but they said the police were with the rifles, with the guns, and chasing everybody away from the ship, because the ship was under full steam and they thought the whole thing will explode and go up. So I couldn't go. So I was looking for my brother, of course, who had visited me shortly before the explosion. And I was worried, where is he? So I couldn't find him. And I asked and I couldn't find him, so I wanted to go back. They didn't let me back. So I blew my stack and I broke through the cordon and I just raced back towards the ship. I wanted to find him. And I asked people coming out of the water, did you see my brother? No, did you see my brother? And then a lady said, did you pull somebody out with me a while ago? I said, no, I didn't. And then your brother must be further back. So I went back and there I met him. That's when I broke down, started crying. He was laughing. And so we two were, I mean, everything was, nobody had nothing. We were just in underpants or whatever we had, because everything was...
And you lost everything?
Everything.
Yeah. And how many people died on the Patria?
About 250 or 300 people drowned or were killed in the water, partly because the wood and the lifeboats and rafts fell down and killed some people in the water. And the ones that were underneath were killed.
And where did the British take you?
The British took us to the port first, gave us blankets, and already Jewish agency came there and gave us hot soup or whatever to have. We were all shaking, freezing. And from there we were shipped to Atlit, which was a sort of not concentration camp, but internment camp. Barbed wire, huts with one road running in the center.
And who ran the camp?
The camp was run by the British police.
And what was the
and some Gafirim too.
And what was the specific use of this camp?
The specific use was, I think it was open to for interning prisoners, keep prisoners interned, and it was made empty for us. And because of the tragedy, the king gave us amnesty. We don't have to be deported. We can stay interned in that camp to the end of the war. Nobody knew when the end of the war is going to be. That was in 1940.
And what actually happened?
Once we were in the camp, once we were in the camp, there was a separation, men on one side, women on the other side. Lunchtime, 1 hour visiting rights between husbands and wives. And otherwise, we were fed chatzilim like this, and cabbage and stuff like this. Very bad food. But they came and said, who speaks English? And I put my hand up. So they took me to work in the canteen. And once I was in the canteen, I was in the kitchen. And whatever the British police threw in the rubbish bin, I could take out and bring extra food to my brother and friend.
Ernest, what was the attitude of the British police towards you?
Very, very rough. They were not very friendly at all. The British are not, especially the colonial police is very, very rough. But I had a very good time because I could speak English, which nobody could, and I had to translate because, you know, there were so many Cockney and Scotchmen and Irishmen and Welshmen among them, and my ear got used to the different dialects. First I couldn't understand the word they were saying until my ear got used to it. And so it was an advantage, and a lot of people got out after 2, 3 months, 4 months, started getting out because of push from relations or push from Jewish agencies or pull through religious, but we had nobody. So we started making tailoring business in Athlete. That means people got sent clothes in, and we had to make it fit or make it shorter or make it longer or make it wider or make it. So we got from the Jewish agency a sewing machine, and we were altering clothes, and for that we got extra money or extra, you know, and so to better ourselves. But we couldn't manage to get released until I think among the last 200 left out of all the people that were 2,000 of us were in there.
And why were you released then?
The Olej Czechoslovakia took pity on the left ones that weren't spoken for and guaranteed for our release. So we got released.
And what did you do when you were released?
When we were released, we were supposed to go to a commission to get £5 to assimilate into the country. And so we were interviewed by that Jewish commission for the £5, and they wanted us to go in a kibbutz. We didn't want to go into a kibbutz, so because we were 11 months, 10 months in a prison, wanted to see Palestine, so they wanted us to go straight into the army. We didn't want to go in the army because we wanted to see Palestine. So they said, we are deserters if we don't go to the army, and we are not bona fide either Palestinians or Jewish, and we can't get the £5, we are on our own.
And the commission was who? Which part of the Jewish structures was the commission? Was it the Jewish agency, or you don't remember?
Can't remember who was in charge of I mean, I don't know who it is now in charge of settling Russian Jews or settling immigrants. Somebody who settled immigrants.
What was your main objection not to going into some sort of army?
At that time the objection was to be free, to be on my own and to start a business or see what Palestine looks like, or you know, be out of prison and be free, not to be straight away again. And I was anyway an anti-army. I never liked armies.
And so you and your brother did what?
we took another two boys that were with us in Athlete, and we formed a firm. First we went to Jerusalem from Haifa to have a look at Jerusalem.
What did you think
Had
of
to stay in a Bet Olim because we didn't have money.
What did you think of Jerusalem?
Well, we didn't see very much. We liked it, but we didn't see very much. And we stayed there only very short time. 3 days later, 2 or 3 nights later, there was a bomb falling on Tel Aviv, and there was a mass exodus of people from Tel Aviv fleeing to Jerusalem. So as soon as we saw all these people coming from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, we went to Tel Aviv. And in Tel Aviv we had a choice of flats. So we rented a flat which was practically brand new in Frischmann 8, which was a corner Ben Yehuda and Hayarkom. And there we actually settled down and said we start a business. And we put out a sign, Högebra, I remember it was Hoenig, Gelbkopf und Braunstein, you know. And I think 2 weeks later they came from the Jewish Embassy, we have to pay misim, we have to pay duty, because you can't put up a sign without paying duty. It's like if you have a dog, everything is taxed in Palestine. We didn't want to pay it, but what could we do? So then it was an empty flat, but there were Australians were in a hotel in Pilz, which was very close, was a very big hotel that had cane furniture on their balconies, and they got drunk and got wild, so they were throwing over the balconies all that cane furniture onto the beach. And we were standing on the beach and picking up the furniture and furnishing our flat with this cane furniture and tables and everything, and carried it into our flat, and that's how we furnished and we slept on mattresses on the floor. And
how did your business go?
well, it went. I first visited some big firms that we would work for them.
And these were Jewish firms?
And Jewish firms, you know, and bigger one, and they gave us suits to make. And then we had some relations, sort of, or we knew from Boskowitz, so we went there. Would they sell us some material so that we can make up the suits? But they didn't want to sell us anything, because they said, look, I'm better off not selling. My price goes up when I don't sell. When I sell, I've lost, because everybody. So it was very, very hard.
Can you describe what the nightlife of Tel Aviv was like? Did you go out with your brother at night?
Well, we didn't have much money, but we went every Saturday morning to Jaffa, because that was still in Arab hands, and in Jaffa we sort of had a shoe shine and a water pipe and smoked cigarettes, and we felt like the big shots.
Yeah.
And we crashed some weddings and some bar mitzvahs, and you know, and you went to a wedding and you say you belong to the bride or to the groom, or you say I belong to the groom. You know, they all had always big handle. And you said you are ganef, this is a bar mitzvah, it's not a wedding. So yeah, they were fun. We had fun, and we also met girls, and we were, you know, and we were going with girls, and you know, and young and stupid, and did all right, but it became extremely difficult to be young and not belong to any army grouping, because young people belong into an army. On top of it, we wanted to see what happened to our parents. So we said,
did you have any news in Palestine of what was happening in Europe?
No. We knew that Hitler was. We didn't hear anything about gas chambers or anything like that. But we didn't know whether they are alive. we knew that they were most probably being in mixed marriage or not Jewish, that they will be better off than others. But we wanted to get back, and we thought that how long can it take? A year, 2 years? That war, how long can it take? So we thought we better get into the army and help liberate them, and see if we can still get them alive, liberate them, and go back.
So what did you do?
So we joined the Czechoslovakian army, which was attached to the British High Command. It was an anti-aircraft regiment, and there.
Can I ask, were the Czech army in Palestine, were that mainly Jewish Czech boys?
Mostly, practically all of them.
And what parts of the world did you see with the army as a young man?
Well, I was first from Palestine. I was sent to Beirut as a signal linesman, and then as a telephone mechanic. I got schooled. There was only 4 from the Czech army in the whole of Beirut, so we had a terrific time there. And also,
can you describe that for us? Can you describe this terrific time?
Well, there was 4 Czechs in Beirut with a 1500 truck, looking after, being on duty to look after telephone faults or calls from gun positions. And whenever there was, you got the driver and somebody went to a gun position for anti-aircraft position, that doesn't work, and you found out that they left the receiver off the hook, you put it in and it worked again, or you had to do a bit of repairs. And when we fixed up lines that were torn, there were thousands of telephone lines from the French and from the Arabs and from the Germans and from the Italians and then from us. So we had, and they were all along balconies, trunk along balconies in Beirut. So on the Place des Canons there were a lot of girls and people, young girls looking after soldiers, so one of us went into the balcony and had a good time, the others were waiting until he comes back again. And then one of us went on holiday back to Palestine, so there were 3, and we thought, the 3 can manage as well. So we managed 3, and then 2 went on holidays and came back. So we left, we sort of had a life, and we went, took a transport and left to see our wives or see our girlfriends, and nobody knew anything. So that was a good time.
Yeah. So after Beirut, what happened? Where did you go?
After Beirut, I had to go back, and we were delegated to go with the 8th Army to chase Rommel out of the Middle East. So we went to El Alamein, through Egypt, Alexandria, to El Alamein, and then to Libya, to Tripoli, and right back to Tobruk. And in Tobruk we came after to relieve the Australians that had been there. And we were stationed in Tobruk, and others went on to Tunisia, which we didn't go anymore. We stayed we were bombed there by Stukas, by German warplanes and all that sort of thing. And we had these torpedo boats which we had to go in, also very sickening to go with this. And I had a bit of a holiday once. A fellow with a plane, a 2-seater, it was the first time in my life, took me on a 2-seater back to Israel to see my wife on the Black. So I went there and back again.
So, and you've obviously missed something out of this. You went back to see your wife.
Yeah.
And you have met your wife in Israel?
I had met my wife in just before I joined the army.
And she
I met her before we joined the army, but
and you
we married before I joined the army.
Right. Okay. And what was her name?
Her name was Halina and she was called Halla, and Potok, and she was the secretary of the solicitor that was defending the Irgun when they were charged. And she spoke 8 languages. She was multilingual because her parents were in the film business, and she lived in Russia and Poland and Paris and Germany and England, and then made living in Palestine. So she spoke Arabic and Ivrit. So she was very multilingual. So we decided when we married that they get extra money from the army. You see, it was much better off to be married because you got much more money when you had a wife than when you were single.
Good. In Israel, and what happened when you went back to see her?
Yes.
Yes.
We were withdrawn from back to Palestine from Tobruk. And there we got a holiday before being sent overseas. And there was one part being sent to Russia and one part to England. That was divided up. And I went on that holiday and didn't return in time to go to England because I wanted to desert. I didn't want to be in the army anymore.
And your brother the same? Or?
And my brother the same. But they told me that they would catch us, and we would be imprisoned, and we wouldn't see our parents, and we wouldn't get back to Czechoslovakia. And anyway, we were talked into going and rejoining. So we rejoined, and that was about a day or two before we left for England, and we got sentenced for desertion to be executed, the sentence in England, because it was too late to do anything in Palestine. So by the time, of course, we got to England, it never eventuated because we were sent to different places, the people that arrived there, and some went into the Air Force and some went into the
Army. What happened to you when you arrived in England?
Well, we arrived in England and were told what training have we got, and we said, and I said I'm a signal, trained in the Signal Corps. So they said, well, here it is a tank brigade. We are not anymore an anti-aircraft regiment. We are training a tank brigade, and much bigger. And Dr. Beneš is the president of the Free Czechoslovakian Army, and we are training for liberation of Czechoslovakia.
And your brother's still with you?
And my brother with me, and we got attached to the headquarters, to the HQ of the tank brigade. That means to the general.
And where was that?
And that was in Kettering and near Southampton. And there my brother was trained as a radio operator in the general's tank, and I was being sent to be a wireless mechanic because they had. So I went to Derby, where they had a special school to train, and there again I had a very good time because I was the only one from the Czech army being trained as a wireless mechanic in Derby with the British Army. I didn't have to do any guard duties, I didn't have to do any kitchen duties, because I had to learn and study not only the wireless, but I also had to language difficulties. So I was sort of didn't have to do all this. So I was getting myself a peaked cap, and by that time I had been advanced to I think first lance corporal and then corporal, and to pips. 1943, and I got myself suede shoes, and I was tie, and I was taken for an officer by the British guards. So we went to dances, and we went out. And
So how long were you actually
and there I was for a few months, 3-4 months, and then sent back, and the whole Czech army was sent to Edinburgh. And in Edinburgh we were to be completely prepared for the invasion to France. And we were relieving the Polish Free French. And it was in the beginning very difficult because the Polish were very unpopular, and they didn't like them, they didn't like their manners, and they didn't like their behavior, and they were to be convinced that the Czechs are different, which we did, and we had a good time. And there was a little episode there. We were on duty, and we went to a dance, and my brother was on guard duty, and he came to the dance, and the officer in charge came to look for him for his guard duty, and he was gone. So they found out that he left his guard duty, and he was charged with detention of 30 days. So what happened was that every day or second day I came to visit him, and I stayed in and he went out. And then 2 days later he came to visit me, and he stayed in and I went out. So we split that prison sentence in half,
The loyalty of
we had a lot of fun with officers. We also had trouble for not saluting.
I can imagine. Where did you go after that? Where did you end up in England?
Well,
before the
we
invasion?
were taken straight from Scotland. We were taken.
So you went to Edinburgh after you went after
straight for December to go sent to France. We were sent to France.
When was this? What year was this now?
It was 1944, I think. Yes, we went with the invasion. With the invasion, I think it was 44, beginning 44. 44, we were sent with the invasion to France, to Caen, and along the Belgian border we were stationed and went to Dunkirk. Dunkirk was our sort of state, that's where we were held up to keep encircled the Germans in Dunkirk. And we kept the Germans until they surrendered, or supposed to surrender. In between there were killings and minefields and all that. The Germans only had sticks, we had minesweepers to get it. And they had made up mines, we exchanged prisoners. You see, the Czech army has got a national holiday on the 21st of October for the creation of the Czech Republic. So this was decided, we have to make an attack on the Germans for no particular reason except that the officers wanted to. But the Germans got wind of it and were waiting for us, and we had colossal losses. They were killing a lot of our people. And we had no replacement. That was an army that once you had killed, you couldn't replace them with others. So we were taking prisoners, Sudeten German, that came from the Hitler youth, had to be also fighting. And these, when we took them into our camp, they were trained to kill. They didn't care where they fought. They were just were shooting at us, and when we took them over as prisoners and said they should fight for us, then as soon as the Germans came out with their hands up from a bunker to surrender, they took the machine gun and mowed them down. They were just trained to kill.
These were Volksdeutsch from Sudetenland.
That were Volksdeutsch from Sudetenland. Hitler used 16, 17-year-old boys that were shooting at anybody who was told they are enemies. They couldn't care less. Or whether they gave up, and you know. So we went with that army right through Aschaffenburg, through Germany, right through Aschaffenburg.
So just to clarify, you had the Czech soldiers,
Yeah.
and you had some Sudetenland Volksdeutsch who were
Which
also
were prisoners.
who were also part of your army now.
They were part taken in the army, not that many, and
And what was your impression going through Germany, going through these parts?
there was
As
the
the
house standing. It was completely like next door this place, completely wiped. We went through Aschaffenburg. There was not. You saw a window somewhere standing, nothing. But you saw people coming out, dressed up, clean Germans, clean, washed. I don't know where. You didn't know where they lived. They came out.
And what was their attitude to you?
Oh, they greeted us as suddenly the civilian people. They greeted us as liberators.
And did
Suddenly.
they know you were a Jewish? Like, did they know?
Well, to
the
them
Jews?
it was the British army, and then it was the American army. They didn't know that we were Czechs or that we were.
And at this stage, had you heard what had been going on in Europe during the war? Did
No,
some
well, we knew that they were taking Germans in. By that time, we were in Germany. It was already end of 44, 45. We knew that people were being killed and concentration camps. We knew not all of them, but you knew about Dachau, and you knew about not Treblinka, but some camps you knew.
And how did you hear about those camps? Through the army or through?
Through word of mouth. I don't know how we knew. I just know that a lot of our boys, of our friends, were kicking the German prisoners and saying, "That's for my father and that's for my mother." So they knew they were, already imprisoned or killed or whatever.
And when you identified yourselves as being Jewish to German civilians, what was their reaction?
Well, we didn't really identify ourselves as Jewish to the Germans as we came.
But
there.
these boys who
Some of them did, and when it came along. But that was only they only hit soldiers, not civilians. Civilians weren't attacked. Only soldiers.
And so you were attached to the British Army, but then you went to the American Army.
Well, we were was under Eisenhower, when the von Montgomery was open, and it was General Patton in Germany that was in the forefront to go to Czechoslovakia.
And you were
so
part of.
We were taken over by General Patton from the American Army, already quite east of Germany,
And what was it like being part of Patton's forces?
For us, it was more or less the same. We had the same. We had our generals, our colonels, our staff. We only heard that he was a disciplinarian and that he was hitting soldiers. That he was a very tough, not like Eisenhower. He was a tough general. But it made no difference as far as we were concerned.
And so how long did it actually take you to get to Czechoslovakia?
Well, it didn't take very long. I think we were at the liberation of Czechoslovakia, which was then, I think, May 45 we came.
And what part of Czechoslovakia did you come
Pilsen.
into? You came to Pilsen.
Yeah.
And what was the reaction of the local population in Pilsen?
Oh, they were all tremendously happy. They were jumping on the tanks and kissing and flowers, and they were all suddenly saying that they were underground and they were freedom fighters, and I mean they were all Nazi collaborators, but suddenly they came out of the woodworks and said they were fighting underground and they were already preparing our liberation, you know, and they were suddenly, they turned, that is a trademark of the Czech, I think, that they turn whoever is in charge.
And did you go into Prague at all?
Yes, we went into Prague, but we had to stop. The army itself had to stop in Pilsen because it was the Yalta conference between Churchill and Roosevelt and Stalin, and they divided up who is taking Berlin and who is taking Prague and who is taking which part of Europe. So whilst they decided it, we had to stop. But we were more or less, it was free, so there was no great discipline. We went away. Nobody chased you, or nobody, you know, there was a euphoria of liberating. So I went without permission with my brother to Prostějov.
Yeah, can I just ask you, when you were in Prague, what was your impression of Prague?
Well, the Prague was actually very, very nice, if I remember, much better than when after the communists, when I came back in those days. They didn't really ruin Prague at all.
But what was the atmosphere with the people?
Well, the people were all waiting for the liberation, all the liberation, and the Germans were thrown out. The German speaking, or the German occupiers were suddenly, immediately, you know, deported. And it became like a Czech nationalist city again in those euphoric days. And I had some relations from my mother's side which also worked partly with German firms because they were non-Jewish, Catholic, and they actually approached us. We should help them stay in Czechoslovakia, and there was no way we could help them because they were German, and I couldn't, even if it was my uncle, aunt, I couldn't.
What
help
happened
them.
to that family?
We did them a favor. They were deported to Germany, where they made a terrific lot of money. They all became rich in Germany. All these German-speaking or German collaborators became very rich in Germany, which they could have never done in Czechoslovakia. And my stepmother actually was also ordered out as a German, because she was speaking German to keep my father alive. And we had to intervene, and I went to the authorities and I said, how German could she have been if she brought us up to be Czechoslovakian freedom fighters and soldiers? So she couldn't be German because we came back with the Czech army. So she got permission, of course, to stay.
Yeah. And you say you went to Prozno.
And my father, just 2 days before, came back from Theresienstadt.
And did he tell you about his experience there?
Yes, he told me about his experience, and he knew about what happened to others, of course, and he thought that he was well off in comparison because he only has been for 3 months in Theresienstadt.
Did he have any knowledge of you in those years?
He had no knowledge whatsoever.
So he didn't
He
know.
had no idea what happened to us whatsoever. It was a complete surprise.
So
When
what
I
was
knocked on the door and stood there with my brother, it was a complete surprise.
Must have been a lovely surprise.
Yes, that was a terrific
And
reunion.
your stepmother, she had helped your father in that period, had she?
helped. Yeah. She was waiting. She kept even the same flat, and so when he came back, they had their same flat, and we stayed with them. And then, of course, we had colossal pull because of being the soldiers coming back. We could get advantages. We got immediately permission to open a business and to get special tickets to buy materials.
And what business did you open?
We opened again manufacturing. Only we manufactured and wholesaled, and two firm, and we did men's and ladies because you couldn't choose what material, whether you got dress material or suiting material. So we, whatever we could get, we manufactured. My brother was the one who got the license. So my brother, it was Walter Hoenig. Actually, I had somewhere a letterhead of it that I forgot all about.
And was it difficult to get supplies of material after
Very
the World
difficult.
War?
Very, very difficult.
Where did the material come from?
Oh, there were factories, a lot of textile factories all over Czechoslovakia and in the German part. But you had to have vouchers. And we had the privilege to get vouchers because we were soldiers. And I had to travel all over Czechoslovakia, from Slovakia to Bohemia, to all the factories to cash in those vouchers and beg for fabrics.
And
that was my job.
Yeah. And what was the Jewish community like after the war?
Well, there was practically none. There were very few that came back. There were. As I said, my wife came back, and the cousin of hers came back. He was in the army.
Sorry, just a moment. Your present wife came back.
Yeah.
We have the other wife in Israel. we haven't dispensed with it. So it's 1945. You're in Bosnia. What happened then? I mean, apart from setting up your business.
Yes, so we set up our business. We applied for flats, which we also had privilege to get a flat. My brother, we applied for our wives to come to join us in Czechoslovakia, and my brother's wife came, so he immediately got a flat.
Right. And your wife?
And my wife at that time didn't want to come. They decided she has to stay in Palestine and look after her divorced mother, whom she supported, and she wanted me to come to Palestine, which I didn't want to. So it was a natural thing that she didn't want to join me, I didn't want to join her, so we just applied to the government to give us a divorce.
But did you go back to Palestine in that period?
In that period I didn't go back.
To be demobbed, you didn't go?
2 years later.
Later, yeah.
2 years later.
And what happened then?
Well, 2 years later, we were told that we can demobilize where we joined up. And as I joined up in Palestine, I said I want to go there, and the government had to pay you to be put where you joined up. So I was applying my brother to be demobbed in Palestine because we got a fare for nothing. And when the Jewish agency found out that my wife, that I'm divorced, so they said, would I take somebody on my passport because I'm entering legally and I can bring her legally into Palestine and she can join the kibbutz. So I had no objection. I said, what for? And they said they will pay me one trip for her and me. So I had her passport with her, and I took her to Palestine with me.
And you married
as
her?
A wife.
You married her in?
Married her in Czechoslovakia, which was also arranged by the Jewish agency, and brought her to Palestine. And when I came back to Palestine, I knew I wanted to give my ex-wife Jewish divorce, because although I was divorced, she couldn't marry again unless she got a Jewish divorce. And the one I took on my passport I had to divorce as well, because it was only a pro forma marriage. So I had to get 2 Jewish divorces in 1 week. So I did one in Tel Aviv and one in Haifa.
With different rabbis?
With different rabbis, and the one in Haifa from the one I took with me didn't want to divorce me because he said we are colossally suited to each other and we are a lovely couple and look fantastic together. And I said, yes, that is all right, but she goes into a kibbutz and I go back to Czechoslovakia. And I only brought her on a pretense to get her legally to Palestine. So I said, well, if you brought her on a pretense, I don't have to divorce you. I said, yes, you have to divorce us, otherwise she can never marry. I can get another divorce, but she can never marry if she does. So anyway, eventually he agreed to divorce us. So we had those two. That takes hours if nobody has gone through it, because they still write with quilts on parchment. But they are very clever now. They've got a razor blade under the desk, and if they make a mistake, they quickly look, because otherwise they would have to start all over again. So they now scrape it off with it. And so we were tried to
Did you have any contact with this woman ever as a friend, or?
I had contact with her, of course, because she had in the meantime met an English soldier, whatever it was, officer, who promised to marry her and bring her to England. And when the war was over after and she wanted to go to England, he said, I don't need you anymore, and didn't take her. So she wrote to me, she is now ready to come back. She would now want to rejoin me in our marriage. And I said, it's too late.
Yes.
I said, it's too late, I'm not taking you back. My father was saying, no way.
No, sorry. Is this your first wife?
My first wife.
No, I wasn't speaking of her. I was speaking of the lady that you helped get legally to Palestine.
I never saw her. No, she went in a kibbutz.
Yeah.
No, I knew the name of the kibbutz, but I can't remember.
Yeah. So what happened to you with all these girls? What happened to you? Who did you end up with?
I ended up with Dieter, as you know.
Yes, and where did you meet Dieter?
I met Dieter, she came back from concentration camp, and as a survivor, and her cousin was with me in the army. And he came one day and said, look, I have got a cousin who survived the concentration camp on her own. And you've got to meet her, she's a lovely girl, and she's the only survivor there, and I'm going to introduce you and you have to meet her. So I said, if I have to meet her, I have to meet her. So I met her, and we started going out together with those few Jewish people that came back after the war, and we became friendly together and then moved in together in her place, or she was staying with her auntie, and decided in 1947 to get married. By that time we had a very good running business and making quite a lot of money, and she was quite alright off, because her auntie survived in Theresienstadt, and they had a bit of money, and she got some things back that were in Heidi, and we married and had a good business, and that everything was going perfectly until the communist putsch in Czechoslovakia.
We might stop there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ernest. That you and Dieter had the business, or you had your business going with your brother, and Dieter was, you were all living well until the communists came. What happened to you, and what decisions did you make once the communists came?
Well, when the communists came, they immediately declared that the people that came from the West, when the British Army, or came from America, are not communists. some of them were actually, some communists came from our army and they became secretary of ministers or became, applied for the communists to cooperate, but the others were persona non grata, more or less. So we lost our license, my brother, and to manufacture. We lost our privileges, and we lost our earning capacity. So we decided we have to emigrate again. And at that stage we had permits to come to Australia, because my sister lived here since 1938 and always supplied us with permits and renewed them when they expired. So we wrote to her we want to come. So she renewed the permits we had, but we could not leave the country because you had to get documents and permission you had to get an exit visa. And we were of military age and we were of working age, and they needed young people, so they didn't want to give permission to leave. So we couldn't get the documents to get the passport, and when we got the passport we couldn't get the visa onto the passport to leave. So we had to bribe people. There were some professionals that you gave money to, and they knew how to bribe ministers and how to bribe these officials to give you permission to get the document. And we found one of those men, and we gave him money to bribe these people. We went in and he opened the drawer and put in $10,000, and if the fellow opened it and gave it back to him, he put it in his pockets. Nothing changed. He knew what was happening.
So what happened to your business?
And he came one day and he said, "Look, I want the Social Security document to give you a permit from work. I have to bribe the Minister of the Social Security, and what I would suggest to give her is 3 meters of English cloth for a suit, and that will clinch it." And so I got 3 meters of cloth, and we drove to Prague by train, which was 6 hours, and from Prostějov, and met him, and took a taxi and went to the minister's home. And he said, "You stay in the taxi and I fix this up, give me the parcel." I have even photo the parcel. And he disappeared with the parcel and came back, and he said, "It's all fixed without the parcel." And 2 days later I got a phone call from the secretary of that minister, who was a friend of mine and was in the army with me, and said, "Ernest, what did you do?" I said, "What did I do? Nothing." He said, "You tried to bribe the minister Social Security with 3 meters of English cloth." I said, "How do you know?" He said, "Because she wasn't home at the time, and that fellow that came there left it with her mother, and she thought it might be a plant and reported it to the ministry." So I got charged with trying to bribe the Minister of Social Security, and there was nothing he could do, and I was charged. It was quite a bit of prison I was supposed to go to. So every time the case came up, we had to pay a terrific lot of money to the judicial system to take it and put it on the bottom again and postpone it. And when it came up again, we had to pay to put it on the bottom. And eventually the president luckily died of Czechoslovakia, and it came a new president, and he gave amnesty for certain crimes which weren't murder or horrific. And I came under this amnesty. So I didn't have to go to prison for this.
Mhm.
But it took us almost a year before we got permission to leave. And then when it came through, they opened now the borders, you can go. We had to leave very quickly. And we took my mother along. My mother in the meantime came from Vienna to Czechoslovakia to live with my brother and his wife. So she was in Czechoslovakia and my sister was here, so she sent a permit for my mother as well.
And what about your father?
And my father with my stepmother stayed in Postgirl.
So you arrived in Australia in 1948?
We arrived in February 49.
49.
We left in Christmas 48.
And what did you do in Australia when you came?
When Australia, I went to work for Waltons. Was it Waltons in those days? I don't know. It was George Street, Park Street, registered with the returned soldiers, so that I only needed 12 months residency to become an Australian citizen.
Mhm.
Otherwise, in those days, was 5 years.
Mm.
You had to be a resident of 5 years before you could apply for citizenship. But because of the army years,
Yeah.
I only had to have 12 months residency. So I worked there as a fitter for menswear, made-to-measure suits, giving the linings and the pockets and the, all the trimming. And Dita worked as a machinist for Mrs. Hertz in town.
Mhm.
So she was a machinist for £5, and I had to get £6.15 or something because I couldn't get a ward wage. That was a Whitechapel Jewish production manager who said, "You are new here and you have to get a slow workers permit because we can't pay you full wages." So I had to go get a slow workers permit so I can get less than a ward here. And it was piled up to the ceiling. The worker, when I started working after 3 hours, hold it, "You're working too much. First of all, you have to join the union." So I had to join the union. I said, "I don't want to join the union, I just come from the communists." No, you can't keep a job if you don't join it. So I had to join the union. And then they said, "I can't work so much." And then I said, "But look, how will I ever get, that's not your job, they should have got somebody else before, that's not your business to get this work down. You work as much as you can, and every half hour you have to take a break. You go to the toilet or you go there, So I had to learn that you don't work here for a living, you bludge for a living here." So that's what I did. And then we came on the ship here with some people that we met, Czech people, who had a couple of £1,000, which was a huge amount of money, and wanted to start a business. So we offered them that we put the expertise in, and they will put the money in, and the women will start the business. So Mrs. Pick and my wife Lita started the business. I kept working. He kept working for Witschkom and Garson, wool sort thing or something.
Mhm.
And after a year, they needed me to join them. So I joined that special clothing company, which was our company here. It was a firm that existed during the war. Some Jewish people had it and sold it with a business name. So we bought the business name, and it was in Newtown.
What was the business name?
Special clothing company.
Right, what's the special name?
And so we bought the business name and started special clothing company with blouses, and and then took Traveler and grew and got bigger, and it went very well until 61 when we went almost broke again and started all over again. Then we split up with a partner because we couldn't afford 2 families from one business.
Mhm.
But in the meantime, I brought my father and stepmother out here in 1955. So they got permits and we brought them out here. And we paid here to the welfare society monthly so and so much to pay for their fares. And they came out here and they stayed for about 10 years, 9 years, and then my father wanted to go back because he said he wants to live the last years of his life where he can understand television and pictures and speak German.
And in this time you had some children?
I had, 53 I had a son, and 56 I had a daughter, a son around.
And have you been happy in Australia?
Very, very happy in Australia.
And can I just ask you just a couple of questions? With this whole Holocaust experience, has that affected, you think, the way you raised your children?
Well, it has affected in one way the children that went through concentration camps never wanted to relive it and never wanted to tell them anything about it. And whenever there was a war film or any Holocaust film, she never went to watch it. And so they knew very, very little. And whatever my children knew about our experience or about her was only what I told my son when he got a bit bigger, and that's all what he knew. And my daughters even today still knows practically nothing. She knows because when we went to Israel together, my Dita took her to Yad Vashem, which was a horrific experience for her, and then she cried, "Why did you take me here?" And she said, "Because I thought you should know something about what your mother went through." And so that was on the way to Europe. That's all she knew about it. So she knows, and that's why she all the time said, "Why do you go through with this? Why do you re-experience?" Because she shut it out. She was able to shut it out of her life. And I didn't want them. So they grew up very, actually, on her tape my son was here and he talked a few words and he explained that he found out only some things from me and he got only thought of it that when he was going into politics and he was going for a federal seat and the people said you better vote for the Catholic and not for the Jew boy here, that he found out what difference it makes to be a Jew boy, and he's happy that multicultural society and they should be tolerant, and that he, so he realized then that there is a difference even here being made in his political life.
And can I ask you, has it affected your spirituality at all?
No, look, I was always sort of nationalist. I always had a Jewish feeling. I was always in Jewish company. I was more or less very, very fluent in Yiddish, in jokes. I was only in Jewish company, and but I was never religious. See, my father was never religious, and my father, my son is agnostic. I'm more or less agnostic. I don't go to a temple.
And your daughter?
I hate extremism. I hate anybody who is I'm tolerant. I let them do whatever they like as long as they let me do what I like. And I found that they are not tolerant. I find that the more religious they are, the less tolerant they become. And I don't like it. I mean, if they don't want to like, okay, don't switch on, but let me go in the fridge, or,
Sure. I understand.
I hate it.
Yeah.
And that caused now the death of Rabin.
And do you have anything that you would like, if you were able to say something to the perpetrators, was there something you'd like to say to And if you had an opportunity to say something to the perpetrators of the Holocaust, is there something you'd like to say?
Well, the perpetrators of the Holocaust is absolutely, I mean, that is an animal. This is not human what they did. This is something which is I could never explain it to me that somebody who has got education, I mean, if it is a primitive headhunter or something, I would understand, you know, or cannibal. But cannibalism or mass murder on that scale is something I can never, I just hope it will never be repeated, which I hoped before, and it has with Idi Amin, and it has with Pol Pot, and it is now happening in Yugoslavia. So I don't know what will stop it. I do not know what will stop it. But I have seen millions killed, which were for no reason at all. I mean, Pol Pot killed millions in cities.
Yeah, and finally, and is there something that you would like to say to the young people about the Holocaust, the young Jewish people?
Well, I would only like them to know what can happen if people become too nationalistic and too intolerant of others, and I would like them to know never to become a follower of a dictator of any kind.
Good, thank you, Ernest, very much. Thank you. Ernest, can you tell us who this lady is, please?
This is my mother.
Do you know when it was taken?
It was taken about early 50s, I think.
Good, thank you. Okay. And could you tell us who this couple is, please?
That is my father and stepmother, and was taken, I think, in the late 60s.
Right. Where was it taken?
This is taken in Vienna.
Good, thank you very much. And Ernst, can you tell us who these two little twins are, please?
This is my brother and myself, taken in Italy on holidays at about 1925 or something.
And which are you, on the right or are you on the right or on the left, you know?
I'm on the right.
Good, thank you. Could you tell us about this photo, please?
This photo was taken somewhere in the desert on the way to Tobruk, and I'm the third from the right.
Are these also other boys from the Czech army?
These are all boys from the Czech.
Are they from the Jewish Czech?
Well, the brigade wasn't actually Jewish, it was a Czech brigade, but there was mostly Jews in it because it was joined up in Palestine.
Good, thank you. And Ernst, can you tell us who's in this photo, please?
In this photo, I am with two of my mechanics. I'm the one on the left, and it is taken in England.
Good, thank you. And Ernst, could you tell us what this photo is, please?
This is a photo taken in Pilsen after the liberation of Czechoslovakia. On the main square, the American army and the Czech brigade. The Czech brigade is the ones with the black beret.
And you were part of this?
And I was part of that parade, but I can't recognize myself.
Good, thank you. And can you tell us who this is, please?
This is, that's me after the war in Czechoslovakia.
Good, thank you. Could you tell us what this is, please?
This is the immigration certificate for entering legally Palestine in 1947.
This is the one where you took the lady with you?
Where I took the lady with me.
Thank you.
Next.
That's the picture of, that's a Dita and
Well, if you haven't got, yeah,
and that's the bundle of, that's the famous bundle of, yeah, okay.
Okay.
And as Could you tell us, please, where this photo is and who's in this photo?
This photo is taken in Prague. It is Dita and myself, and Dita is carrying a parcel of 3-meter material which caused a lot of trouble, and I got charged over it and almost imprisoned.
Good, thank you. And can you tell us who this is, please?
This is our wedding photo taken on the 21st of October 1947
With Dita.
in Prostějov,
In
Dita
Prostějov.
and myself.
Good, thank you very much. And can you tell us what this is, please? What these are?
These are the medals I earned during various campaigns in the Czechoslovakian army, partly under British and partly under American High Command.
And the Czechoslovakian...
The Czechoslovakia was the insignia that we were carrying on top of the sleeve.
Good, thank you very much. Ernest, could you tell us who this is, please?
This is my son Ron, with his elder son and my grandson Benjamin.
Good, thank you. And could you tell us who this is, please?
This is my daughter Judy, that was taken a few years ago.
Good, thank you very much, Ernest. Thank you very much. Ernest, would you like to introduce all these people to us, please?
Yes, this is my wife Dita. This is my daughter-in-law, Christine. This is my elder grandson Benjamin, and this is my young grandson Matthew.
Matthew. And Dita, is there something you'd like to tell us about Ernest?
I don't think there's enough time to tell about him.
Is there something that you'd specifically like us to know?
Hello, hello.
He's very kind, very good,
Yeah.
family man,
Hello. Hello.
and I'm very happy to have him.
Good, good. And is there anything you'd like to say, Christine, about your father-in-law?
Hello.
Well, I'd just like to say Ron and Judy are very disappointed that they can't join us this afternoon. That's Ernest's son and daughter. But we'd just like to say that we're very proud of what my parents-in-law and their parents have done today. We think it's a very important thing that they've done, and we're just very proud of them.
Good. Okay, thank you very much.